time we left. And then what I was doing a cruise. This is a nice night. Are they all right or are there any left? No, these are ready. No, they were all left. Because I have to decide whether I want right or left. So I have to send my daughter
Yeah, that's my sole function.
I appreciate it.
You like your legal opinion?
I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll start with the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, would you do the roll call, please?
Mr. Anderson? Here. Mr. Jackson?
Here.
Mr. Kern?
Here.
Mr. McCucci? Here. Mrs. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Akmanowitz?
Here.
Ms. Weed? Mr. Diliberto?
Here.
And Mr. Klein?
Here. Okay, we have a few announcements. There was an executive session immediately following the August 8th board meeting to discuss personnel and legal matters, and this meeting is being recorded by the board secretary. Before we get going with our main meeting, I would like to make one other announcement, and this is about Kurt Wallace. Curtis James Wallace, 69, passed away on August 15th at Foxdale Village State College, PA, after a 1.5-year battle with esophageal cancer. Mr. Wallace taught here for 33 years, the last 31 of them at the Milford Middle School. He served as student council advisor, yearbook advisor, and director of spring plays and musicals. He was also the longtime scorekeeper for the Quakertown Community High School boys basketball team. While I never had the opportunity or the pleasure to meet Mr. Wallace, I've read many of the posts on the Quakertown Community School District Facebook page today, and it's easy to see that he was a well-liked, respected, and dedicated teacher. Our condolences go out to his family. Services are scheduled for Saturday, August 24th. In lieu of cards and flowers, contributions may be made to the American Cancer Society or the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. And it's the Gilbert Funeral Home of Whitehall who is making the arrangements. Thank you. Next, we move to the approval of the minutes from the August 8th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? Mr. Kern, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Anderson, discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. This brings us to our first general public comment. Madam Secretary, has anybody signed up for public comment?
Helen Kondracki?
Hello, Mrs. Kondracki. I know you know the drill. State your name and area of residence.
My name is Helen Kondracki. I'm from Haycock Township. If you were waiting for me to speak out about the egregious obscene taxes, I'm not going to disappoint you. 3 trips to Grandview Emergency Department prevented me from attending meetings when you were contemplating the death sentence you did to my financial security. It's ironic that I received my tax bill the week of Independence Day. We all know what that day represents. Including with the mail that day were a few other invoices. A fuel oil invoice for $600, one for $960 for auto insurance, a $810 invoice for homeowners insurance, another $750 for ambulance service, plus another invoice for use of the hospital emergency services, an MRI, a CAT scan, and an EKG. A recent report stated that the average homeowner in Pennsylvania is paying $2,600 a year in property taxes. I am an 87-year-old widow who has had no children in this school for 41 years. I am paying about double that amount. One gentleman commented recently that our home is usually the greatest investment we have made in our lifetime. The only entities benefiting from my investment are the school districts, the parents, the teachers, not me. Taxpayers have to pay high teacher salaries, which transform to millionaire-sized pensions. Taxpayers also pay the lion's share of their health insurance. Nobody pays mine. Then we have parents sitting on the board who dictate tax increases, and other parents who demand more and more programs and amenities and are displacing their obligations onto those of us who can least afford it. Many people believe that the elderly households have sizable retirement savings. That's certainly not me. During my years in the workforce, salaries were not as lucrative as they are today. The combined salaries of my husband and me was never more than $35,000 a year. A large portion of my retirement income was used to pay for 5 years of my husband's stay in a nursing facility. Upon his death, I lost his pension, our health insurance, and 62% of his Social Security. My income is less than 1/3 of what the lowest paid teacher receives. Reports are saying that those who have salaries of $75,000 are living from paycheck to paycheck, not enough money left for sports teams, summer camps, birthdays, and vacations. Why then do I see parents pushing their grocery carts with their child with an iPad, playing video games? I see teenage children wearing $200 sneakers, $150 t-shirts emblazoned with names of sports figures, all of them with their latest model of a telephone. This week, the Intelligencer reports that the Quakertown School District has a surplus of almost $15 million, and that the percentage increase from 2016 to 17 and to 2018-19 is the highest of all schools in Bucks County at 7.2%. With 2019 and 2020 for these increases, is it the percentage for 2019 and 2020 will be 9.9%. Is this the majority of you who voted for these increases? Are you satisfied? Could that be the reason 92 properties in the Quakertown School District are being sold for unpaid taxes? My question to you all is, would you pay $125,000 for this empty bag? That is approximately what I have paid to the property taxes since my child graduated 41 years ago. This empty bag represents that I received nothing. When you are all relaxing in your air-conditioning comfortable homes, just think of this 87-year-old widow making the best of 100 degrees without air conditioning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Kondracki.
Melanie Romanowski.
I'm Melanie Romanowski. I'm from Milford Township, and I'm here to request the full-day kindergarten at POF this year. I feel like if there's enough kids to support it, we should definitely have it. My son, for one, has been reevaluated and could potentially be full-day, and he also has an IEP, which in our transition meeting, everything was very comfortable, everything was known, everything was exact and precise moving into September. Now I'm a week out. I don't even know what school he's going to go to, if he's going to be with the people we already met with, and if he's going to be full day, half day, and where else he's going to end up if he's not at POF. And as a parent, I'm fully committed to POF. I'm in their PTO. I chair their Race for Education. I can't imagine what that would be like to have to split my time between two different schools to give both my kids that equal opportunity for me being with them and involved. So I would just like to request that the full day get added.
Okay, thank you.
Jasmine Wright.
Good evening. My name is Jasmine Wright, and I'm from Richland Township. I've never spoken at a board meeting before, so I'm just going to take it in for a moment. Thank you. WRIGHT, and Jasmine, JAZMIN, no E. Yes. I am here for the additional second grade teacher at Trumbowersville. As of today, I confirmed with our secretary, we have 30 kids in each class. And I think anything I say tonight is nothing that we don't all know in our hearts. 30 kids in one class is impossible for a teacher to get to all of them, especially when you have a spectrum of kids that are on reading level and kids that aren't on reading level and all in between. Last year, we knew about the problem in first grade. We had 28 to 29 kids. My daughter would often come home and say, the teacher just couldn't get to me. She just couldn't get to me. I'm like, well, why aren't you asking her this in math? She couldn't get to me. I have taught in a class of 30. You cannot get to all those kids. So I am pleading with the board today to add that additional second grade teacher, because if you're not on grade level reading by third grade, you're never going to get there. This is our last push for them. This is when they're assessed for Math Plus next year. The fact that you have 30, you could have kids in Math Plus, but because there's 30, they might not get there because they don't have that attention. So that's what I'm pleading with the board for tonight. And all these parents here in this row, we have 2 girls going into second grade. We need those class sizes down. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I was wondering what explained the second row.
George Del Rossi.
Hello, everyone. My name is George Del Rossi. I live in Milford Township. I was here a few weeks ago and spoke with you, and I'm back for some answers.
Okay, as I'm sure you're aware, the policy committee is going to make their recommendation during the board meeting, and we will make discussions at that point and hopefully get you some answers then.
Okay, when is that?
That's on tonight's schedule. Tonight's
Okay.
agenda.
On tonight's agenda?
Sure.
The policy meeting that I was just at?
Yeah. Yeah. We're,
No, this board meeting, during this board meeting.
yeah.
During this board meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so then I'm speaking a little before.
You can feel free to share, though.
I mean, if you have any
know.
comments you would like to make, feel free, but this is going to be part of our discussion tonight is,
Okay.
is this subject.
Some of the stuff that was discussed there, there's associated risks, according to the lawyers, of allowing homeschool students to attend the tech school. Okay? Quakertown School District's policy clearly states they're allowed. We've been down this road before. We've discussed this. Okay? Some of the things that were discussed in there, the risk to the school district of additional costs for any other programs that may come of that by opening that door are already there. Those risks are already there just by the student living in the district. Any kind of special needs, any other kind of programs. The fact that there's a child that lives in the district makes the school district responsible for those other costs. All they have to do is enroll in the district. They're still responsible. All right, that's one thing we didn't talk about in the last meeting. Everything else would just be bringing that all up. Again, there's partial reimbursement to the school district when a non-public school student goes to the tech school. So when it comes to money, there's partial reimbursement for the amount of time that they're in the tech school versus the time that they're not. It's partial. And again, your policy, talk about potentially changing the policy, but as of today, the policy clearly states that a homeschool student can go to tech school. This is now the third meeting I've been at. We talked about it, and all right. I thought I had to sign up to talk about it now, but we're going to talk about it later.
We're going to talk about it in the policy reports when the committees report out, okay, and then there will be a discussion
in
about
this
that.
meeting, so I'll still be here.
Tonight, yeah. So
Okay.
hang around.
All right.
You're looking for the policy and programs consent agenda. When that comes up, public comment for that, go.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we have no one else signed up for public comment. Is there anybody else that would like to comment at this time? Okay, moving on then. This brings us to our superintendent report.
Good evening, everyone. Tonight we have a very short, I hope, superintendent's report. And we'll kick it off with Joe Kuzo giving you all an update on our new website. I know we've received some emails about the new website, and Joe's going to give us an update.
All right, so it's been probably past 6 months we've been working on the migration process kind of behind the scenes. I believe it was 2-3 weeks ago we cut over live to the new website just as a status. So all the content is now over. We're completely live. There's been some ongoing issues with Verizon Fios customers. We resolved some of them today apparently, but there's still some more out there. And I just ask if you're one of those, reach directly out to me. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can directly do, but I can kind of be the liaison between the district Verizon and the host. As far as that, we had 3 weeks ago, we had secretaries and administrators trained, so buildings can now start updating their content themselves. So a lot of the things that may have been missing, that may have been lost in the migration path, depending on when they posted it. Some of the things that were posted late in April or May, while those might have already been migrated, may have been missed. So now you'll start seeing a lot of that building content come back up. Gary's kind of taken over with the facilitating of the updates and kind of getting the news stories up there. But overall, I think the majority of the work's done, and just looking for any feedback, any changes you'd like to see, or just general comment. I mean, I'm overall happy with it compared to what we came from. One thing we tried to do in the organization, like under technology in some of the areas, we try to put things into kind of 3 buckets for families, for parents, for students, and for teachers, and kind of try to keep that theme along. So when you're looking for something particular, chances are if you're in the community, you're falling into one of those. So any comments, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but
It's too fast. The drop-down things go way too fast.
Unfortunately, that's something I do not have control over.
Welcome to the next generation, Steve.
You need a slower computer.
Guilty. No, I think it looks great though, Joe.
It looks really good. A couple of, it's just so, and if anyone doesn't realize it, migrating over to a new site is a big uplift. It really is. So it looks great so far. I think, we're going to have to work out the kinks. That's to be expected. I've been involved with many migrations to new websites. I did notice there seem to be a lot of broken links from the old website, and I think that a lot of new websites struggle with this. I'm kind of frustrated with the new YMCA website. Get off my soapbox now. But I think there's some, like if you were to Google, if you were a parent, I was Googling just some things about my son's school, and I would click on them and it would just say, not responding. And so I don't know the best way to mitigate that entirely, but I'm sure that's something that ongoing, we're going to resolve.
Right. Ongoing, that'll really resolve itself. A lot of times you're getting cache searches from the old site, so depending
Right.
on where that,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be resolving to our new site right now, depending on where that link was going.
I wonder if we could redirect some of that stuff, though, to the new.
Yeah.
It's expensive?
Thought though that
Really?
like most website tools come with like a check program where it goes through and looks for dead links. Is that not something that
We're
will come
talking about Google and search engines like that are going to have.
Yeah, these are
cached
cache links.
archives of searches that are
and the
pointing.
website's gone.
Correct.
Where those are pointing to, it no longer exists, so it's nothing that we can just, flip a switch, but over time as that.
As the searches you're saying get to the new site, the old ones are not going to show up in the top.
Correct.
Yeah, not to bore everybody, but technically you could, right? But it's not worth it.
You want to spend a lot of money for something like that.
Curate those, right?
Yeah.
You could technically do a redirects down in the engine, but
I
who
didn't
cares?
realize that was so expensive.
Well,
I guess
how
'cause it's so many?
So many, exactly.
We just had the IU meeting on Tuesday, and I don't want to get into a giant list of specifics here, but to what degree are we trying to be ADA compliant in regards to our website?
Well, that was actually one of the main concerns why we made this switch originally. The Blackboard platform that I had before, although you can make it ADA compliant, being as there's so many hands involved in maintaining this on an ongoing basis, there's too much room for that not to occur. So moving forward, the site right now should be almost 100% ADA compliant, if not all. And moving forward, when you add pages, there's specific required fields that must be populated that make it ADA compliant.
Mr. Schock, you're up.
So with the school year right around the corner, Dr. Hunter asked me to give a brief update on where we stand with hiring, specifically with the teaching staff. And we've had one of the busiest hiring seasons in the last about 10 years. And as I look at the numbers, dating back to the end of last school year through the summer, the team's been working hard to fill about 50 teaching positions, which doesn't even include the internal transfers. And that's comprised of contractual openings as well as long-term sub and long-term per diem sub positions. To date, we have about 3 unfilled positions right now that are contractual, but we are in the process of interviewing, and about 4 that are still unfilled from a long-term sub. And that's not unusual for a couple of reasons. As you get closer and closer to the school year, when you've hired long-term subs and long-term per diems, they're still looking for contractual positions in other districts. So we typically fill them and then find out, shortly later that they've taken a contractual position in another district and have to start over. But I am very pleased at where we're at. I think our new teacher academy, which Chad Evans and his team in the OTL office run, has over about 30 teachers in year 1. So 30 of those individuals are brand new teachers to the district. So I think we're in a pretty good spot right now. And even though I said we had about 6 or 7 unfilled, I believe we're pretty close in about half of them to make an offer in the next couple of days. So that's it.
I know when we had the assistant principal openings for the high school this year, we had 175 applicants. How about for the applications for those 50 positions for teachers? What's it look like?
I don't have a number tip of my tongue, but I would say it's in the thousands. Specifically at the elementary level, it's not uncommon to get well over 100 applicants for an elementary position.
One of the things I know that many of you on the board and those in the audience have read the book Good to Great, and you don't hire the wrong person and then put them on the seat, give them a seat on the bus. Make sure you hire the right person, because you'll spend a lot of time bringing that person up to speed. And I've known through all of our processes this summer, and what we've done before is we make sure that they meet the requirements for our position. We've gone back to the drawing board several times this summer after we've taken some of our candidates through several interviews. And then we just opened it back up again because we weren't satisfied with what we had. So I'm very pleased with watching that process unfold. Any questions on staffing? On Janet Pallone, Ms. Pallone, how many aides and support staff do you have to hire for back in special ed?
Every day. So I think we're posting.
And you have about 67 positions, so that's going up all the time. So there's a lot of support staff. I know. Go ahead, Zach.
So the number of support staff positions that were open was around 30. So, but that's comprised of aides, food service, secretaries, but about 30. Most of them are probably aides, though.
So in our HR office consists of 2 folks. Barb's in the audience sitting back there smiling, and she just can't wait for the beginning of the school year to start. And so it's been an exciting time for us. Any other questions, comments?
I do have a question. Do you expect to hire all those open FTEs? Do you have applicants enough that you would fill them all?
Yeah. We're so the contractual positions that we have open right now, we have a grade 1 position that is open due to what was an opening. Then we went through the process, and one of our teachers from another building actually applied for an internal transfer. So then we reposted it with the new building. Then we have the music position that we're still working on. I believe they are pretty far into that process. And then a special education position that they're also interviewing for. So I would expect to have some recommendations that, well, obviously we'll have them at the next board meeting, but sometime early in September at the very latest.
For contractual positions, we're in a very good place. For long-term subs, we've hired some long-term subs who then have gotten a contract in another district and they turn us down. So that's been a struggle. That's about it. Next topic is on enrollment. Ms. Edwards, would you give us a update?
Sure. The updated numbers are kind of hot off the press since Pam Fothergill put those together around noontime. So this should be pretty accurate as of today. And there is an attachment in board docs that you can see. To give you an idea what we've done since the last board meeting, we looked at certain places where how could we solve a class size problem other than by considering adding a section. So as an example, we looked at Neidig's half-day kindergarten. Mr. Gottschalk contacted some of the families, particularly who lived further away, like out in the Haycock area, and offered them the opportunity to go to Richland instead, primarily Richland. And that kind of solved our 26 kids in half-day kindergarten issue at Neidig Elementary and kind of spread the kindergarten students more equitably among the different buildings. So we don't have any areas in half-day kindergarten that remain a concern. One area that is still a concern that some of the parents addressed tonight is the second grade at Trumbowersville. Where with included students, they're at 30 per class, they're at 29 per class at the all day in the classroom level. Last year we had kind of high numbers in first grade, but Mr. Schmucker was able to collapse his 2 kindergartens into a single section because their kindergarten enrollment was very low. And then he used that teacher the other half of the day to support first grade. And it worked really well. The students in first grade at Trum performed extraordinarily well, so that solution worked well last year, but this year it's not available. So one of the 2 sections that we do recommend that the board approve adding is an FTE to address that second grade class size at Trum. We had like a backup plan. We thought that because Richland, in the budget, there was a first grade section. Earlier in the summer, Trum's first grade numbers were low enough that we thought if we take the new registrants at Trumbowersville and have them attend Richland instead, this would be newly enrolled first grade students, that then we wouldn't need the extra section at Richland first and we could use it for Trum second. But unfortunately, too many more, well, fortunately or unfortunately, more first grade students enrolled at Trumbowersville, which doesn't really make that a feasible option. So I share this amount of detail just so you have kind of a sense of all the things that we do behind the scenes before coming to you to say we really think that we should add a section. Another spot that continues to be high is the POF fourth, and that's one of the sections that I have closed to new enrollments, so any new fourth grade move-ins will not attend, even if they're in the POF area. We will have them attend a different school where there's a lower class size. The other thing that we bring to you for your consideration tonight has to do with adding a full-day kindergarten section at POF. POF is the only building that does not have a full-day kindergarten section, and they had 22 students that qualified. So if that is not something that's able to be approved, then we would be able to serve approximately 60 of those full-day kindergarten students, and we would probably consider moving a lower enrolled section to POF because transporting 22 POF kindergartners to other places all over the district for full-day kindergarten is not the most logical scenario in that case. But if we're able to add a full-day section at POF, it would allow us to serve additional students and would allow us to keep more of those students attending kindergarten in their home school. There still would be some students attending full-day kindergarten in a building other than their own, but it would greatly reduce that number. So those are the overall. I think the overall the numbers look lovely. Both on average and in most individual classroom instances. For those that are always interested in how we are running in terms of our projections, we are very close to the total number of students that were projected. So we have a high degree of confidence that our projection methodology is working pretty well. So that would be the update on class size.
Just for background, our practice since the 14-15 school year when we piloted full-day K, our objective, as someone, I believe a parent talked about, Jasmine talked about a student being successful through the K-12 process. By the end of third grade, they need to be reading the third grade level. Backward mapping that, we start that with pre-K because we have 32 seats, 34 seats for pre-K. And then we have every student in the past 4 or 5 years who was not ready to learn by an assessment. It's done multiple times to make sure that it's a genuine assessment and an outcome. We've provided them that service. This year, we have a lot more students who are not ready, whatever the reason is. POF has never had a full-day K program. We started out with small, I think 1, 2, or 3. That first year, 14-15, we went to 4 schools, and we've transported students who needed that out of the POF attendance area out to other elementary schools to make sure they had the service. So we're asking this year, we have a balloon year for POF, and that's why we're asking for that additional FTE.
Where in the agenda is that listed? I mean, where in the agenda is there a action for us to take to approve or not approve 2 new FTE positions? Because I don't see it. And maybe I'm missing it.
As far as I know, there is not a motion specifically to approve additional FTEs. I think you would give us the go-ahead to proceed, and your approval would be when we bring the 2 people back to you to be hired.
Can I just, so looking at this document, you have status quo and then with recommended changes, and the numbers are the same. So the number for POF, 4th grade, would go down to 20 point something, correct? The section would be go from 3 to 4, is that correct?
It would be the Trumbowersville 2nd grade. We are not recommending an additional section for POF. They don't have anywhere to put it, even if we were to be inclined to recommend it. The 2nd grade at Trumbowersville would go from 29 students per class to, with a 4th section, 21.8, which would be similar to the district average with the 4th section added in.
And Mr. Mercucci, we spent a decent amount of time at the Finance Committee meeting discussing this. I was kind of on the same page as you were at the last board meeting, but once they explained the reasons for it and how it would possibly level out in the future with a couple different variables, I felt a lot more comfortable from what they were recommending and kind of understanding why with that.
I have a question. It's like a bubble coming through the system, right? And like blah, 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 blah. So that bubble keeps moving. It wasn't first last year, and there was some magic you were able to do to make it go away. There's no magic this year. What happens next year and the year after that? Like, does a teacher follow the bubble, or do we suddenly have an excess teacher in the wrong grade next year, or how's that work?
Typically, the teacher follows the bubble. Sometimes, depending on how bad the bubble is, or if students withdraw over a couple of years and the number of students in fourth grade is 6 or 8 students lower than it was in second grade for some reason, then we might recommend reallocating that teacher if we had a more immediate need somewhere else. A lot of this arises from the redistricting that occurred 5 years ago now, where we established the hard boundary lines, and the board approved the map that had hard boundary lines in order to eliminate open areas. And eliminating the open areas had some very positive impacts, but the negative impact is that kids don't fall neatly in grade level packages within the hard attendance areas. And if you look at some of these numbers from the standpoint of creating class sections, a number of 59 is awful. Okay, like you can't have it be 2 sections, but 3 sections is really pretty small. So there's a lot of numbers in here that, from the standpoint of somebody who has to determine sectioning, these are awful breakpoints, in terms of where some of the numbers fall, but we don't want to move students. And we've pretty much observed the hard boundary lines, although we are having to take some liberties with new students that are enrolling now in order to not, like if another student moves into the Trumbowersville area, they will not be attending second grade at Trumbowersville if the new section isn't approved. We'll send them to a different school to not make it worse. But we're not going to displace, a child who's been at Trumbowersville and send them somewhere else just because it's lower. So those.
Can I ask a question? If you had the ability to redistrict, would you need to add teachers?
My short answer, without doing all the math, would be no. We would not need the sections if we were able to more equitably distribute the students that we have.
That's what makes this really tricky. And so I think most people probably, and I can say for myself, I didn't appreciate what the administration has to go through each year to try and balance class sizes with capacity in each of the buildings, and because, like Nancy Ann mentioned, if we were to just say, all right, we're just going to scramble some people around, we could perfectly balance these class sizes, but it's just not that simple. So it's incredibly tricky. I can't imagine, what you all are trying to do with balancing all this, but I have to say I do like the recommendations. I think 30 in a second grade classroom, much less any classroom in elementary school particularly, is not ideal. So I'm definitely in support of this. My only comment would be maybe could we have the conversation that it's hard, I get it, it's hard because we don't know the enrollments until the enrollments come to us, but foreshadow, knowing that we had the first grade class sizes where they were last year, foreshadowing maybe the FTEs that we might need for the upcoming year before this meeting or the prior meeting. But maybe you guys can help me understand that a little bit better, because obviously it's your day-to-day.
And I think there's a deeper issue here, and I think this is really what I want to highlight, is that when you make decisions years prior, they affect the way we do business today. And if we hadn't promised not to redistrict, whoever made that promise, some board prior to us, they hadn't made that decision to never redistrict in 5 years, you wouldn't have to, you wouldn't be in this business predicament today. And that's really what I think we need to focus on in our decisions as a board moving forward, because you're adding about $250,000 in operating expense by approving these tonight, which I'm in favor of, because I think smaller class sizes will be better for the kids. But to the taxpayers and everybody else these decisions that you didn't have to make.
But I think they did feel that they had to make that decision. Then I just want to point out that obviously they made the decision for a reason, because they knew that it would be beneficial. By the way, the neighborhoods break down so that kids and their neighbors would all be in the same schools. You could talk to your neighbor about what happened in the middle school, and they know what you're talking about because you all go to the same school. And I think they may have, knew that at that time. Of course, no one can predict that, oh, well, because this happened, we're going to have to hire 2 more teachers in 5 years, so maybe we shouldn't make this decision. But given that decision, and even knowing that 2 teachers may have been picked up to accommodate for I still think maybe somebody would have probably made that decision. We may actually make that decision, and in 5 years,
No, I'm just saying that I think you have to, and that's where I keep getting back to as a board and as an administration, is we can't pigeonhole ourselves into decisions that are going to affect us in the long run, because again, this was a decision probably made with great intent. I have nothing against the intent, but that it does really add a lot of operational dollars, and I would argue that it's needless. Because if you could appropriately distribute these students, you wouldn't have this issue.
Yeah, I'm guessing the families probably thought it was useful, right? I mean, there was a whole committee, if I'm not mistaken. It was, I think it was before my time as well. But
I believe there was also, if I'm not mistaken, a transportation aspect to this.
I was going to mention that, yep.
The cost for the busing after the redistricting. I believe there was if I'm not mistaken, Nancy Ann, you can correct me, there was a significant savings by the way we changed the transportation plan at that time, which was part of it. Now, I have a question on that too, and we promised no redistricting at that time for 5 years. We're up to that 5-year window, we're very close to it. Are we beginning to plan for the next redistricting? Has that been discussed?
The plan, as I understand it, and it has been touched on in a couple meetings, but not discussed in depth, would be next year to convene a redistricting committee.
Like the last time.
To examine all the issues regarding elementary placements, boundary lines, open areas, all of those things, and to make recommendations to the board for what we would be doing for the fall of '21.
Okay.
And the reason we did not recommend doing that this year for next year is the completion date for NIDIG. While we certainly expect it to be completed on time, and we have no reason to think that it won't be ready to receive students on time.
Hear that, Rob?
The very idea, right, Rob? Yeah, okay. Thanks, Betty. The very notion that we could possibly redistrict, over 2,000 elementary students and then get to the first day of school and they're all going new places, and for some reason NIDIG wasn't ready to open, that was not viewed as the most prudent course of action. So we would live with it one more year, have a redistricting committee next year. The community process worked really well last time, and I think the result reflected the community's values in terms of what they wanted in placement, and then that would be implemented for fall of '21. So we have one more year to try to make do with some of these situations.
We can redistrict. Do we feel that it's necessary?
Well, to Keith's point, we wouldn't have to spend $250,000 from now in perpetuity. Right? It's not even like we can get rid of that expenditure. Once we hire, it's a done deal.
There was a savings in regards to the restructuring of the buses so that we could do it this way, to the tune of $250,000.
Interestingly, 5 years ago when the board approved the parent committee's recommendation, prior to that, Alan Rosenberger at Levy Bus assigned students to schools. And it was all, and you, when you would look at class sizes, you could see it was all even across the entire 6 elementary schools at the time. And then that created the open areas, so the folks that were in the second row were the ones that were being moved from school to school every year or every other year, depending upon leveling those class sizes. So that's why it was locked in back then. So
That goes into that too. You know, I remember talking to a friend of mine, same development, all the kids would go to different schools. And that's insane.
we had one neighborhood that had 3 different elementary schools where students came out of their buses going different directions, crossing over each other.
I lived in one of those neighborhoods.
Yeah, I mean, there's an emotional aspect to that as well. When kids are having to go from school to school. I mean, thinking about my own kids, you know, like I would not be happy. My son's going to kindergarten tier this year, and I would not be happy if he were not in the same school as his brother, you know, and so there's just so much that goes into it. Transportation, sure, but then you also have the whole, you know, going from this school to that school. It's tricky. It's definitely tricky, but the financial aspect is an important one as well. I will admit there. I just think that my question just would be, though, if last year that we saw that this was a problem in the first grade, do we ever look at it as in, and I'm sure we do, but I'm just trying to clarify, do we ever look at it as in, oh man, these class sizes are really big in this first grade level, so we need to anticipate once they go to the next grade level, we might need to add another section?
Well, yes, ma'am, but there's other factors. As you know, overall, predictively, when Ms. Edwards puts the projections together, she's within probably 10 students overall, based because we know how many live births we have 5 years out, and we're pretty darn close with those numbers. I forgot what my other point was. We also know that in the current 5th grade class right now, only 67% of those students started with us in 1st grade. So that means 33% of our students have left us.
Transient.
So the mobility rate within our elementary schools is extremely high. So as we're laying it all out there, we can do our best guess. And I think we've done a good job with that. You know, we might have been off and we could have anticipated that, but if you remember, we're down about 75 students from last year or so, and so that's about 3 teachers, and we were placing those out carefully, and they already got placed out. The other thing is, if you remember some information we provided you over the last 5 years, the number of elementary teachers that in our buildings that resign or retire on average, to kind of give you a flavor of, we'll be able to make this up if you all approve our recommendation for the 2 positions. We'll be able to make that up as soon as we get to cross-leveling again and redistricting. So the FTEs, either count could go down, but in our budgeting process, we have planned to keep the FTE count at that number. If you remember when we brought the PFM modeling in here over the next 5 years, we've kept our FTEs constant in there, correct?
Another question, sorry to interrupt. Why wouldn't we approve the FTEs beforehand? Why wouldn't, I guess I'm just always not understanding why we would wait to approve it until we've already given the offer to the person.
Well, that comes to the question I asked originally. There's nothing on the agenda today to approve 2 FTEs, yet the administration seems to be asking us to approve 2 FTEs. And
They're asking us permission to bring 2 FTEs to us.
Correct.
It's not a vote,
but to Kayla's
though.
position, I think we need to have some kind of discussion to say, is this board in favor of hiring 2? Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter what they
Then the question is, where are you going to get them from? That's the next logical question. And do we have quality folks out there to fill the positions? The answer is yes. We normally get our contracts for our core classroom teachers out of our long-term sub pool. We have people, a lot of you know, I won't mention names here, but had a long-term sub for 8 years. And in my 1st or 2nd year, he got a contract. And now he's already with, 12, 13 years in the system, but he started out as a long-term sub salary. We get a lot of our teachers stay with us as long-term subs because they move here, want to stay here, want to have a long-term experience with their district, so that's probably almost guaranteed where we would get these 2 positions from to fill these classrooms.
But again, it doesn't matter to me where you get them from. I'm just talking about a number, 2. I'm just saying the number is 2. Does everybody here?
Not vote for FTEs?
Normally, FTEs are approved in the budget. Like, this situation is only occurring because we have identified a need that was not accounted for in the budget. So, like, for example, like I said, I thought we might be able to use the first grade Richland slot to slide over to address the Trum spot. It didn't play out that way. So normally, the board is approving the total number of FTEs with the budget, and there is no reason, if you are more comfortable with approaching it by, making a motion to approve the addition of 2 FTEs to address the 2 elementary needs, there's no reason that you can't approach it that way.
Okay.
Mr.
It's
Shuck,
the same thing.
do you have any insight into this? Because I heard you speaking of this in the Finance Committee meeting, as far as, the FTEs, and is the money there for them in this year's budget, and looking into the future if, as Dr. Harner indicated, through retirements and stuff like that. Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, sure. In finance, we came at it from a purely financial perspective. Obviously, we're in the Finance Committee. The 2 FTEs would cost, depending on what you brought the individuals, so is it a senior teacher that has experience, is it a brand-new teacher, somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $220,000 for not each, for both. That's all in salaries, benefits. Because we did the budget a little earlier than we usually do this year, we had some resignations and retirements after the budget was complete. So the money is there. Then from an FTE perspective, because we're large enough, every year we have individuals that resign, retire, so you could always absorb that later on if you had to. So you're not committing to this level of FTEs indefinitely. So if enrollment were to drop, for example, and we could redistrict or right size, it'd be very simple to simply remove FTEs later through attrition.
So in very general terms, then, what you're saying is if we approve the 2 extra FTEs to address the bubble now, we're not committing to that long-term necessarily. That can be addressed through retirements and such, and bring the FTE number back down again, correct?
Certainly. Like we do every year through the budgeting process, we work between the business office, HR, and the rest of cabinet to develop what are our staffing needs, and if the need wasn't there, we would reduce those FTEs and simply eliminate them through attrition.
Thank you for that clarification.
The key is also the key is also going to be the 2 things, the retirement, the attritions. We're dealing with this because of our mandate not to redistrict. So we have a swell at some place, and which is why we need to hire 2 new people. The assumption is when we redistrict, that need's going to disappear. Those 2 people will not simply they won't disappear. They'll simply be replaced. When we're doing attrition these days, we're not letting that position die. We're at a bare minimum staffing level, so we rehire anybody who retires usually. But if 2 people from a senior level retire, well, we'll lose 2 elementary school teachers because we redistrict. So the 2 FTEs will come off the books at that time. So that's where in 2 years we'll be back to normal. Except I do want to ask Dr. Harner something that you spoke about. If these 2 FTEs are on the book, I thought you suggest you'd want to carry them in the budget. I'm suggesting we not. We're going to do this because we need it for the next 2 years before we redistrict. At the end of that 2 years, I'd like to see that disappear and not be on the books, because that's the whole point of Mr. McCucci's very good concern. We do not want to keep augmenting our FTE count unless we have to.
Or we could reallocate it to continue to reduce class sizes. That's
Right.
another thought.
Right.
We brought the PFM modeling to you. Our objective is to reduce class sizes. One of the things that where our class sizes now in the elementary schools are more than a student per teacher down, 1.5 students per teacher down in elementary school than they were 5 years ago. If you recall, and probably Mr. Anderson, only one sitting on the board, can remember we were 25-1 in our elementary classrooms when we were 19-1 in the senior high school. And we've been able to flip that with your priority, and we're a lot more FTEs total with all the extra guidance counselors and all the other people there. But I would think you hold on to it, and every year we drill down with you all through the budget process and talk about it.
So just to make sure I understand, we had some resignations and stuff this year. Inside the budget right now, we accommodated for people that resigned. Proving these two would not necessarily mean adding another $220,000 to the budget. It's kind of already in the numbers because we didn't replace those positions. Do I understand that correctly?
Correct. Once the budget's approved, you never add to the budget. Instead of those dollars going to the bottom line, we would just now be spending them on the FTEs that if the board would.
We wouldn't take it as a savings at the end of the year. We're spending it on labor.
Correct. Yeah. So you
Okay.
never add to the budget. Correct.
I have one question, Nancy Ann, about, is there an option for providing more teachers in that same classroom without hiring, if you get my drift?
No, we don't have anybody
Free.
free, yeah.
Okay.
Last year it worked because of the only need for one half-day kindergarten. And then the kindergarten teacher supported first grade in the afternoon is how we did it. But this year, as you can see, Trum has, 40 students in half-day kindergarten? So that would be a little large to collapse into one section.
Al Rosenberg really determined?
Yes, sir.
So
That's crazy.
just for everybody's knowledge, yeah, my mic's on. Can you not hear me? Really? Hello?
There we go.
So you have your operating budget, Zach. You have the resignation of veteran teachers. That savings equals what?
So we actually took a look at that this week. Preliminary numbers, I would expect around the $500,000 mark that we would be under right now. Remember, we always like to try to get to $1 million, but this is more at this point in the year than we would normally have. And that doesn't even include the savings we would get from leave of absences as well.
So right now you have in salaries for teachers.
Salaries and benefits. Yeah.
Salaries and benefits, right? $500,000.
Correct. That I would expect to come in under budget, yes.
So the spend, everybody, is 220.
So let's say it's 200, let's just say it's 200, yeah, so we
Or
would.
250.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Something like that.
So you're looking at having a savings right now of 250. Again, our target's always to try to get to the $1 million, but we're ahead of the
Salaries
game right
alone.
now. Salaries and benefits, yeah.
Salaries and benefits, right. Here's the only caveat to that, is that next year it's on the books. Doesn't go away unless you don't replace that FTE.
It's on the books now, though.
Right.
It's $500,000 budgeted for labor, and those people left. So at the end of the year, we have an extra $500,000. If we agree to these two teachers, we'll
Hey.
have $250,000.
I'm
That's
with you. But we vote yes for this, and I bet everybody up here better be voting yes for tax increases, and then we better be explaining it to the public.
Well, we're not increasing any taxes, right?
I'm saying it's gonna eventually catch up.
If we add 2 FTEs, then they would need to be taken out at some point, or it's going to increase the cost in the out years. That's what
And the
Keith
out
is saying.
years, I see what you're saying.
Yep.
This is an easy game. It's a tough game.
Yeah, it is.
It's a tough game because the actual,
The only way we make money is the tax people. Again,
Cor-
I'm cool.
But we have
Smaller
tenured
class
teachers.
sizes, life's better for our students, life's better for our teachers. We have all that, and I'm okay with that.
Mrs. Kondraki's not, but, yeah.
I know, I get it, and I think we just have to be diligent to understand.
And my point in saying what I say is because I think, we try to balance both. I think we try to do a good job on it. I would love to be able to say right now that the answer was redistrict and then you could fix it, but it would screw up a bunch of families, I'm sure.
Performance
more of a
as
hassle.
well,
I mean, there's a lot of
possibly.
other ramifications. It's not as easy as just doing that, but.
Well, that's coming, which is the good news, and there's a plan to do that, and that will eventually hit. But kudos to you, Mr. Makucci, for thinking this way, because I know you enlightened me a little bit, the FTEs versus the budget. So thank you for that, and I like your insight into that.
May I ask one question, Mr. President? Is it possible to allow maybe some of the students to go to a different school? I know we have the hard boundaries and stuff, but is it an option?
Well, we made that offer last year to this same group, first grade, correct?
Yeah.
And we didn't get any volunteers.
I do
Okay.
remember that.
Say again?
None of us got offers in first grade in ours.
It might have been for kindergarten? Okay.
So it is maybe an option.
Not a week out from school starting.
Right on. Thank you.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
Absolutely.
happy if it was even longer than that.
So do we want to make a motion? Does somebody want to make a motion to move this forward?
Sounds like you.
I think this is, got Jackson's fingerprints
I'll make
all
a
over it.
motion to move forward with the additional FTEs. Did I say that in a legal way?
2 FTEs.
And just make sure you earmark them for the 2 reasons requested by Nancy Ann.
I would second that motion.
Do I need a
For-
question?
For kindergarten?
For kindergarten
And second grade.
Kindergarten, second grade. Kindergarten at POFs. Yeah, fully kindergarten at POF, second grade at Trum.
Okay. Since we've been discussing this, we have a motion and a second, and since we've been discussing this, pardon? Ms. Mitchell made the motion. Mr. Akmanowitz made the second. We've been discussing this. Does anybody have any other comments before we take a vote on it? Okay. All those in favor of increasing the FTEs next year per Ms. Mitchell's motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
That completes the superintendent's report.
And you said it was going to be short.
Well, you got a big lift off the shelf there.
Okay. This brings us to the standing committee reports. We'll start off with the Finance Committee meeting. Mr. DiLiberto.
We met earlier tonight. The first topic was talking about substitute teacher rates and also assistant nurses. What was it? I'm sorry. Aides.
Yeah, that's right.
We discussed a comparison to other districts, fill rate, and then referrals and IU training to possibly drive up participation in and filling the open positions for sick days. We also reviewed a compensation letter. It was something I had brought up at an earlier board meeting, the value of providing a total compensation statement. The rough draft was reviewed today with some recommendations on that. There was a report back on the 90 elementary school renovation. Happy to report that it is on schedule and on budget. We want a percentage? Okay. And then we spent time on the FTE impact of adding the 2 teachers, which is kind of what we reviewed just now. And then the last item we had talked about is awarding playoff payments to coaches based on what their average per diem is, and then reducing that by 50% to come out with a rate for playoff payments. That concludes the update of the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. DiLiberto. This brings us to the Policy Committee. Ms. Weed is not here.
It was me.
Mr. Kern is going to talk about that.
Yes, sir. We discussed the homeschooling VOTEC policy aspect again, and we decided that we need to present to the board some of the pros and cons and the facts surrounding the case so that the lawyer is basically saying it's a no, don't do it. But we want to provide the board in the September meeting with just maybe 1 or 2 page presentation on these are the facts to consider so that we as a board can decide whether or not to take that risk. So we'll do that next meeting.
Slight problem, we promised an answer at this meeting.
Well, at the moment, they are in the full, like they've pointed out, our current policies do not preclude the homeschoolers, so.
But if we wait to the next meeting, it's going to be well past.
They can, I would recommend they are potentially able to go forward and go to the enroll or whatever the process is. I'm not sure what the process is of how you get to the VOTEC, but that's what I would recommend, is for them to go ahead through with the process, and then we can fix the policy later for future.
But what does that mean for the student if we fix it later?
They'll be grandfathered in, like there was a student earlier. That would be one potential precedent. There was somebody, I guess, a few years ago, I think before we had made a policy change, and they got grandfathered in so that they would be there the full time.
Do we need to make a motion and vote for that?
You know, on the surface, it seems like a very quick, easy decision, one way or the other.
It is a quick, easy decision.
The reality is it's not. It's not at all, because there are, we have a legal opinion that says one thing. Our policy says one thing. It says the opposite thing. There's school districts in the community that surround us that do another thing. And the reality is we don't understand all the pieces, all the moving pieces. And so what we really want to do is get a good handle on that so that we don't pigeonhole the district today into making a decision, because the answer could be, what are you shaking your head for?
We don't have a choice. We may make a decision. We have a policy. It's listed. It's
But wait a
public on the
minute.
internet.
We don't.
Hold on.
Well, let Keith finish. He's talking about the future. We want to.
What I'm saying is, the right answer may be that we open up everything and not just tech school. Maybe the answer is, if they're homeschooled and they want to take an AP course, we allow them to take an AP course. Maybe that's the right answer. We
want to present it to the board, right?
Maybe they could do. So we don't have enough information today
I think
to make a decent decision.
I think I understand, and for everybody, let me try to synopsisize, if that's a word. Mr. Kern, what you're saying is that the policy committee recommends to allow them to register their daughter for the VOTEC school through Quakertown. We are going to have a presentation from the policy committee, and we're going to have a discussion about whether or not we want to continue to allow that. If the answer is no, they would be grandfathered in so that their daughter gets to go to the VOTEC school. If we vote that we're not doing that again, then there's time enough to do that, correct? Or if we vote that, yeah, we're going to continue to allow this to happen, then we'll vote on that.
Yeah, so the issue is our current standing policy allows them to go to tech school.
So
when they do their research, the only research, despite the fact that it could have been a clerical error, could have been, there's a lot of reasons for why it's not right, but it was, so in their research, they have it clearly documented that we allow this to occur.
But we don't always follow that. We didn't with the volunteer policy.
Mr. Gardner.
Well, so
Mr. Gardner.
I'm just saying,
so
we got to.
We talked about that.
Let's keep the
We
discussion
absolutely
on
talked
this.
about that.
Mr. Garten, question.
Confusing.
If we allow their child to enroll in the VOTEC school, as we've discussed, and the board would vote at the next meeting not to do this anymore, and we grandfather them in, is that a reasonable outcome, given the opinion I have here from the lawyers that say we shouldn't do this?
Well, let me begin by saying that the opinion doesn't say that you can't do it.
Oh, I know. They're recommending that we do not.
The recommendation is that you bear risk. However, the decision is still yours. And my advice in my correspondence was, you have a policy that says they can do that. So I think that the administration cannot disregard the policy. So I think if these folks made an application to have their daughter go to the tech school this year, they'd be entitled to do that.
Okay.
Couple questions. One is, though, if the risk, if by allowing that, and just for the record, I'm not opposed. I think homeschool children should be allowed. You guys pay taxes. I don't see any reason why you're not, allowed to have those services. And I also have someone that I know that shares the same situation, so actually that adds a third question. So this may not only include this gentleman, we may have another, 3 or 4, right?
Anyone who makes an application
Yeah.
before you change the policy would be entitled to do exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, so that's one point of clarification. So there's 3 or 4 families out there who potentially would qualify under this application. That being said, though, if they're saying this is a risk by them being allowed to be enrolled, even with us not following or not changing the policy, even if we do change it by allowing these folks, is that going to open up the risk regardless?
No, you always
No.
have a right to reconsider your policies. You don't have a statutory obligation to accept them or reject them. You make your own decision. So it does not create a precedent that gives you any risk.
Okay, that was my first thing. So are we all, just not to bring back past stuff, but are we all now agreeing as a board that if it's in our policy, we follow it the way it stands? Bueller?
My advice.
Bueller? I'm just keeping it real. Like, we've had policies that have stated things that we were like, Anyway, moving on. Point made.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell.
There is a policy
thing, but
and program consent agenda vote tonight, so.
I would think that you ought to manifest your discussion about that family and their child attending school by a vote tonight, just so there's no misunderstandings.
Well, I was going to suggest that we add, on the policy and programs consent agenda tonight, that we add this to that agenda.
So we can make a motion then.
So that we can vote and we can give these people an answer that have been coming to the last few meetings.
Respectfully, if it is our policy, why would we have to vote on it?
Just so that there's a record of it, so that, yeah.
Make sure there's
No
no
problem.
misunderstandings.
Correct. Okay.
Oh, that was the other thing I was going to mention, sorry. To the gentleman's point earlier, so if their child wasn't homeschooled, they would be entitled to all of the things that the public school system would offer them. So just because they're homeschooled is why we're saying we're going to take this stand. So I can understand the gentleman's point of, saying, well, if I chose not to homeschool my kid, which, look, I know you can go back and say, oh, well, you could be in private school, blah, blah, blah. But.
Well, I think it's a deeper discussion. I think that's really where the policy committee has to present to the board, because I don't think,
Right.
if you really just take it at a superficial level, you're like, well, they pay taxes and therefore they should get whatever you get in a public school, which is not the case, because private school doesn't get, the same rights as, and homeschoolers aren't covered by law. We read that in the attorney's opinion. The problem becomes not necessarily their kid where they're willing to, invest time and transportation and all this other stuff. It's for the other 134 of the 135 that we have no idea what we're getting ourselves into, as far as just what's the liability as far as cash is concerned, what's the liability as far as enrollment is concerned, how do you even operationalize it, where does it end? Is it just with tech school, or does it apply to anything that we as a district want to do? And again, I'm not opposed to any of it. You just have to understand it all in order to make a decent decision that's not going to bind this district to doing something that, one, we can't financially afford. We may not be able to financially afford it if we figure out that it's $1 million cost to us. Those are.
It's a fair point.
That's all like crazy thinking, but that's really the way you got to approach this, and not just with like a bleeding heart for a kid that wants to go to tech school, which I'm there, but we have to be realistic.
Well, we'll wait anxiously for what the policy committee has to present to us next month. So,
Is it possible for us to announce that we're going to vote on the draft, was it 119 or something? Right, can we vote on that in 4 weeks and have the policy committee address these alternate options later on?
Well, I think the draft is going to
First
be a
reading.
part of the presentation and everything. I think it's all going to be rolled up into one.
Well, so
here.
here's what we were thinking. The thought is that there's mixed opinions on the direction we want to go as far as a policy, the three of us sitting on the policy, okay? So we would present to the entire board. And if the board wants us to explore a policy that opens up everything, then we can do that. If the board wants us to explore a policy that doesn't allow any of it, then we'll do that. Because what we don't want to do is waste time in one direction or another. And again, we're kind of, myself included, are not necessarily sure which way we want to go yet.
We can change the policy again, though.
Correct.
That's my point.
Yes.
You know, let's.
Yeah, but we don't
My
wanna-
theory
we don't
is
wanna
let's
waste
get it
time.
the way that it was supposed to be. Then we can do all this magic math and figure out what we want to do again, and then we can rechange the policy for a future year. We know what a past board wanted to pass that never made it on an agenda. You know, I'm not against it necessarily. You know, our policy is different than what it says. We can announce now that maybe next month we're going to vote on that specific amendment to the policy, and then we can continue to have the discussion you want to have, which I totally agree. We should have the full conversation.
That's an interesting option. We can definitely bring it up next
I
month.
don't think you can, because don't you need a first and second reading?
You do.
Two successive board meetings, Mr. Garden?
Your policy is, I believe, is 2 readings.
So since nothing's on the agenda tonight for this specific change,
Right.
it would have
Oh,
to
we're
be a
not talking
first-
about tonight. We're talking
No,
about.
I understand, but you're saying, talk about taking action at the next meeting. You can't.
Yeah, we'll bring
You got to do
something
a
to
first
you.
reading next
No, he's
meeting.
talking
But we're not
the
talking about taking
presentation,
action.
Not actually voting.
I thought Mr. Archimonowitz was talking about taking action.
Let me
I knew we
talking
couldn't
about
vote
setting a
tonight because I
date.
knew it had to read, but I didn't know we had to have 2 full meetings. I thought we had to have 1 full meeting in between.
So my point was merely that we certainly could choose next month to do a first reading of the hidden, the draft that got stuck. We can definitely do what Mr. Akmanowicz is saying, and then we can also choose not to do that. I'm just saying that's an interesting option that I didn't think of. We can do that. It doesn't mean we will. I'm just
But
saying we
again,
can.
that's his suggestion, so.
Yes, so
We have
we'll
time
bring
to-
that up next.
We definitely
next
have
month.
time to sort
Can I
that
ask
out.
one quick question.
No. You can ask a long one.
If we were to change the policy in 4 weeks from now to the one that was hidden, does that really do anything for the next 8 months? Or does it only occur at the point of like enrollment? In other words, once we get past tonight, does it really matter whether we do it next month or over time? Is there a rush behind it?
The only reason would be if 1,000 kids decided, who are homeschooled, decided to suddenly just swarm the tech school. That'd be the only issue.
All right, well, there's not 1,000.
Logically speaking, you would think that this issue would have the most interest or impact at the beginning of the school year. So I don't have a crystal ball, but that is logical. I just wanted to point out that normally when we're considering a policy, we do list it in the agenda pending the policy committee's discussion. So when we get to the policy committee report, it is listed for first reading. So you will want to state at that time, Mr. Kern, that we are not doing a first reading on that policy. Another option is you could go ahead and have the first reading based on the original, the language as proposed 2 years ago, and the policy can be amended or changed, Mr. Garten, I believe if I'm correct, between the second reading. And so if you go ahead and do the first reading tonight, and then at the next meeting, you have the presentation from the policy committee, and at that point, you can decide whether to proceed with second reading and approval or do something else entirely. So that
Awesome.
that would allow you to take action next month.
That's what we'll do.
Mr. Garten, is that accurate?
That would permit you to follow the Akmanowicz approach.
Yeah.
Because you would have had the first read.
I don't know if I want that coined.
I kind of like that.
I
We're
think
gonna
it's
do the
too late,
Akmanowicz
sir.
approach.
It's in the minutes now, so.
I got one additional question.
No,
can
you said
somebody
only one
enroll-
question.
Can somebody enroll, I know, I got a million questions. Can somebody enroll in a tech school mid-year?
It is possible. I think sometimes, depending on the particular program, it might be full, or it might not be possible for the student to meet the requirements of the program in half a year, in which case they'd be encouraged to wait and enroll at the beginning of, say, their 10th grade year or something like that. But it is theoretically possible.
Yeah, so at
Okay.
any point, any homeschooled student can enroll in our school district, and we have to take them.
In the school district, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
All right, let's move on with the standing committee reports now. Education and curriculum, Mr. Anderson.
Okay, tonight we discussed music sectionals in which students are taken from a major subject to go to a music lesson and what we should do about that. And we're also shown the coming new addition to the school's website that shows the entire curriculum of the school. And that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. The Bucks County Intermediate Unit number 22, Mr. Jackson.
The IU met on Tuesday night. I have included within board docs the list of actions taken on that evening, as well as the awesome news, which is a highlight of a lot of the wonderful things that the IU is doing around the county. So for your look, there it is.
Might as well go into the legislative report as well, sir.
Legislative report is a little more interesting. Couple things I want to highlight on the legislative report. I'm not sure how many people, how many of the board members here are aware that we're supposed to be doing training. I believe it's like 1 hour every elected cycle or something like that. I'm not sure if that's, I thought that was the past thing, but something that is recently passed, and it's on, let me find the right page here of the report. The school safety issues that have taken up in Harrisburg and Washington recently have highlighted a lot of the tragic incidents that happen in a lot of schools around the year, or around the country many times. There literally was a law passed recently out of Harrisburg. I'm going to read this as it is on page 4 of the report if you choose to look at it. School directors are now also required to have an additional hour of training on the subject of trauma-informed education. Local school safety committees must develop a plan for trauma-informed approaches and coordination of services for students in need. So I'm not sure if at all our administration is doing that, or if they're working with the IU to address those needs, I imagine.
That's all part of our goals for this year.
Okay.
So we've got that one covered, I think.
Yeah, so these are those, Mr. Klein's favorite term, those unfunded mandates. These are imposed upon us, unfortunately. The other would be what is known as the IDEA funding. IDEA meaning Individuals with Disabilities and Education Act. That was passed in 1975. The federal government was supposed to foot the bill for a lot of the special education costs for the local districts. That was supposed to be at 40%, but never went anywhere, and currently lingers between about 12 and 14% out of the 40 they're supposed to be footing. Last night, I attended a PSBA meeting. Congressman Fitzpatrick was there, as well as Congressman Doyle out of the lower Montgomery County area. They are co-sponsoring a bill currently making its way through Washington that will require the federal government to get back to 40%. It's not going to happen until 2029, they say, but at least it's working its way through Congress, so that's a good thing. So I like to hope that, they'll give us the money they promised so long ago and never materialized, but
that would be nice.
Just saying. There's a lot of other issues in there.
For everyone's understanding of the history, that's 1974 they promised that. 1974 is when IDEA was passed. Isn't that right, Janet?
Yeah. I was 13 years old.
So when it happened, sir, how old would you be?
Okay, how about the hat trick, Mr. Jackson, the Quakertown Community Education Foundation?
Ed Foundation met last Wednesday, not just a couple days ago. There's not much going on. We just, I know that the large grant we gave for the expanded libraries at the elementary level. I understand that's running well. Ms. Hoffman, Dr. Hoffman can testify to that, yes. And we're trying to come up with interesting ways to replenish the money since we're starting to spend it.
Oh, great. Good. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Diliberto, did you like the hockey reference there? Cool. Okay. Next is the Upper Bucks County Technical School. Mr. Akmanowitz.
The last JOC meeting was August 15th at the Upper Bucks County Technical School. Jeff Sweda reported roughly $2,700 in donations, including a 2009 Pontiac G6 for the Auto Tech program and supplies for welding, including $2,000 in gift cards from Chick-fil-A here in Quakertown. We have been provided a report of class expected enrollment. I passed this on to our secretary to be filed with the minutes. Our most recent reported total was 765 students at the tech school. 353 of those are from Quakertown. On September 6th, we have an upcoming parent night. On November 7th, we have an open house, so anybody that may be interested in the tech school in the future, please bring your children. In addition to some routine business and improving grants, like the 2019-2020 Carl Perkins grant for $132,000, we had approved the hiring of many new employees and pay rate for evening teachers. We hired our new HVAC instructor, Andrew Walyung. Pardon me if I butchered his name. Andrew, to the joy of many, is a dual certified instructor in both HVAC and plumbing. We also hired Christopher, another name I may butcher, Gentizilla, who is our new full-time CTE supervisor. We approved unchanged the cafeteria prices as well as prices for the institutional services provided, like the bakery, the dental clinic service, and the animal care cost, as well as an agreement for the Upper Bucks County Technical School to receive some limited building and ground services from Palisades School District for one school year. The JOC approved a motion to have the PSBA review our policies, and a copy of that contract will be attached to the minutes. I think that, forgive me, I don't have
It's
that on here.
included
I think it's about
actually in,
8,000.
it's usually included in certain memberships. So I think that it's included in ours as well.
Might want to avail ourselves.
That, we haven't talked about that actually, our PSBA membership for the next year. Anyway, sorry.
Policy review service is to fix any errors, redundancies, and conflicts in the policy manual. The JOC approved Tracy Cram, JOC Secretary to the Delaware Valley Insurance Trust. We approved clinical site contracts between Doylestown Hospital and Brookdale Senior Living Solutions, and the Upper Bucks County Technical Schools Healthcare Careers Program will be working with those institutions. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the JOC was in consideration of a contract with the Bucks County Intermediate Unit to provide business services effective July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2022. The motion passed. A copy of this contract will also be provided to the board secretary for the official minutes. We are looking for sponsors for the food truck still. I can provide anyone information if you're interested. Please come see me after the meeting. The truck is definitely going to be out there once it hits the road. There's lots of requests for it to be at different events. There will be great visibility for the truck that will be run by the students. So I think it will be a hit, and it will draw a lot of eyes. The next regular JOC board meeting is scheduled for September 19th, 2019 at 7 o'clock in the JOC boardroom. That concludes my report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Akmanowitz. This brings us to the public comment on fiscal items being presented for a vote tonight. Anyone like to comment on the fiscal items? No? Okay. This brings us to the fiscal consent agenda, which consists of a motion to approve the bus routes established for the 2019-2020 school year, request permission to solicit musical instrument bids. So we need a motion to accept the fiscal consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Jackson.
I'll second it.
I think Mr. Akmanowitz beat you to it. Discussion.
What's the total that this will bring us up to of instruments that we purchased?
It's on a cycle though, right? This is different?
This is. Sorry, I don't have a microphone.
These purchases were budgeted for this year as part of the curriculum cycle, even though year 3 is not technically till next year. The dollar amount precludes us from being able to spend that much in one calendar year, so we spread it over the first 3 years of the cycle. So last year, we spent approximately $80,000 on instruments, mostly for the middle school. This year is approximately another $80,000, which will be for elementary school and the 6th grade center, a few still for Strayer, and then the following year would be majority of the elementary school costs. The high school received about $300,000 in instruments during the new building through FF&E. So in the last 5 years, we're looking at about $500,000 in instruments.
This is included in your budget, though, if I recall, right?
These purchases are included in my budget, yes.
So it's not new money, it's money we expected? Because I remember I was having this conversation.
Yes, we did move things up at the request, actually, of the music teachers and Quimpo. If you remember, they came to a board meeting last year, so we kind of accelerated the number of instruments we were buying because they indicated to us that they couldn't wait 3 more years to get new instruments.
Was that the
So we
infamous
asked,
French
French
horn?
horn. The French horn, right?
Well, yes. So we do have, interestingly enough, though, they didn't ask me to buy a new French horn, but maybe that'll be coming next year. So we have some large instruments included in this. If you notice, tubas, things that are quite pricey. So even though there's fewer instruments on this list than there were last year, there's some more expensive and larger instruments on this list. So that's, if you're comparing those things, that's why.
So we can't pipe the piccolo through like a little audio converter and turn it into a tuba?
Right. Interestingly enough, I had no idea how expensive piccolos are. They're really expensive. Yeah.
Out of curiosity.
My daughter plays the trombone. Go, Maddie.
My son plays the trombone. I was just going to ask, so, because we pay every month, we pay to rent an instrument for my son who's going into 5th grade. So how do we decide which elementary instruments we decide to purchase?
Sure. So we do still have families that rent instruments. The school district, many districts do it different ways, but the way that our district does it is that we purchase instruments that typically we are unable to get students to play because of either the cost of renting them or the transportation. So any student who plays the tuba likely has a tuba at home, but they're unable to get it back and forth to school. So we have a tuba in the building so that they can practice when they're in school, and then they would practice at home. That also happens for programs that have orchestras with like a bass or a large cello. They actually can't take that on the bus, so we have the instrument in the school so that the students, most of these students do still have an instrument at home. The other option is, you'll notice there's some different types of saxophones and things that maybe a student would not be willing to try it or want to play it because the cost to rent it or the cost to own it is more expensive. So as we look at the type of instrument and whether or not we can, support it as a school. So that's why you'll see a lot of the same instrument, like every elementary school is getting a new tuba for that purpose. And they're all, of course, to make it more complicated, they're all different sizes, and you can't give a high school marching tuba to a 3rd grader. So it's not even, we do think about those things and we try to repurpose them, but there is a life to an instrument. And at some point, the cost to continually repair it really is a diminishing return for us, especially on, woodwinds sometimes, like clarinet keys and things like that. There just becomes a point where continuing to repair it is costing the district more money.
Kind of like a used car.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I still have my flutophone from 6th grade. Yes, sadly.
Donate it, yeah.
We still actually do teach recorder skills in the elementary school, but that is a parent pay option. The parents pay $5 for the recorder. The district doesn't pay.
I have one right now on the floor in my living room.
So do I.
Working on recorder karate? Are they getting their belts on it? Yes.
I just realized that it came apart, though, actually. I was trying to clean it the one time, and I'm like...
Oh, yeah. That's a public service to parents. They do come apart, and you can clean that section. I would recommend that.
Thank you. I have a question about the bus routes. Just in general, is there any major changes to the proposed bus routes this year, or are they typical from what we had last year?
Mr. Schock, who has been talking to Mr. Levy on a very frequent basis recently.
To answer your question, they're standard bus routes. There's nothing that's unusual about them. It's the standard operating procedure with Al Rosenberger. He has software that he runs it all through to make sure they're the most efficient routes. So, yeah, nothing unusual.
No major changes or anything?
No, and I did provide a few attachments on the ride time analysis. I originally did our public school students, so there's a separate one that says non-public, which just includes them as well. So you can see, so if you look at the public student ride times, it looks pretty good, in my opinion. You'll notice there are no ride times that are obviously over an hour. There's only 3 that are actually above 50 minutes. So it looks pretty good.
Okay, great, thank you. Any further discussion on the fiscal consent agenda? All those in favor of accepting the fiscal consent agenda as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. This brings us to public comment on the human resources items being presented for a vote tonight. Seeing no public comment, we will move on to the human resource consent agenda. A is the Act 93 agreement. The board has received information on a proposed 2-year agreement between the district and the Act 93 administrative group for the period of July 1st, 2019 to June 30, 2021. B is the supervisory and technology staff. C is the professional staff. D is the support staff. E is the substitute staff. F is unit pay. Do I have a motion to approve the human resources consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Achmanowitz, is there a second? Second. Mr. Kern, discussion. All those in favor of accepting the human resources consent agenda as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, except Mr. Diliberto has left. Okay, this brings us to public comment on policies and program items being presented for a vote tonight.
Careful you don't snatch defeat in the jaws of victory.
Interesting comment, Mr. Carton.
Yes, on that note. All right, I'm just up here real quick to request that you do not change the current policy and you do allow homeschoolers to attend.
Good news is we can't change it.
Right. My legal advice here told me not to talk too much, so that's all I will say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other public comment on the policies and program items being presented for a vote? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the agenda as presented, and then we're going to do a separate vote to address the issue. I'm sorry, what's your last name again?
Del Rossi.
Del Rossi. Why I can't remember that is beyond me. I apologize. But we'll have a separate vote on that after we vote on the policy and program consent agenda.
I think it's because both of your names are really just one syllable, Steve Klein, and he's got 2.
It's a good theory. It's as good as any other one.
We're making a really good time.
We got the motion in a second.
I told him that. I just told him that.
Okay. All those in favor of accepting the policy, oh, wait a minute, no, I'm sorry, I have not read them yet. Excuse me. On the policy and programs consent agenda tonight is a motion to approve a contract between LifeWorks Foundations and Quakertown Community School District for the year 2019-2020. Next is to approve a contract with the Penn Foundation, Inc. for Student Assistance Program for the 2019-2020 school year. And finally is a motion to approve Mr. Ronald Jackson to attend the PSBA Leadership Conference October 16th, 2019 through October 18th, 2019 in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Do I have a motion to accept the policy and programs consent agenda as submitted?
So moved.
Second. Ms. Mitchell, and second by Mr. Achmanowitz. Discussion.
You have to bring us back candy? Throwing it out there.
I think so. Mr. Jackson, can you handle that?
Well, I think I can handle that, just a little
Okay.
bit. No promises to what it will be,
Selection.
as long as I can bring back my favorites, you know.
All righty. All those in favor of the policy and programs consent agenda as presented, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we come to the special vote that the Del Rossis have been patiently waiting for. All those in favor of, we need a motion to allow the Del Rossis to enroll their child in the Upper Bucks County Tech School via our policy
Well,
as it.
I think the motion should be, can I make a recommendation? The motion should be that we follow the current policy.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Yeah, you know what, that's a lot shorter. I make a motion.
It's not these guys, if not the Del Rossi family, it could be anybody who
Gotcha.
comes up right now.
Before a motion is made, can I raise an issue that Ms. Edwards spoke to earlier?
We'll have discussion on it.
But there was an implication that we were approving a first reading tonight as well, and
No.
it was,
I think we're going to come to that. I think
this is the place to do that.
This is the place to do it after you take this action, that you would consider, I forget the number, as a first read tonight, so you can come back.
So it's two things we got to vote on.
Yeah, the other one's
Just making sure.
137.
Just making
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
It's a good, thank you. Good clarification.
So
So
do
yeah, I would make a motion to accept the current policy as stated for the homeschool being allowed to attend the vocational tech.
And I would second.
Okay.
Yeah, that is currently policy, both policies, 115 and 137 allow that.
Discussion. Mr. Akmanowitz. No worries. Okay, time to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Congratulations.
So I would,
Yeah.
I would like to.
It is a big deal. Okay, stop it.
Okay, now about the policy read.
Like 5 times. So I would like to do a first reading of policy, I think 137, the draft. I gave you. 115. I gave you my. I gave you my folder back, so I can't read that one line. But it has an addition of a caveat for homeschoolers. Basically, it's saying homeschoolers are being treated separately.
The one change is in delegation of responsibility, item 7, to strike the language "or homeschooled student."
That's the only change in the whole.
That is the only change that was originally contemplated to policy 115.
And that was back in like January, maybe, of 2016?
In January of 2016,
Yeah,
yes.
so it's long ago. But we'll make it the first reading so that next month it's an option on the table.
Motion should be to accept that as the first read, and then vote on accepting it for first read.
So I make a motion to accept 115 as a first read as Ms. Edwards
I second that.
read.
Okay. Discussion? Mr. Jackson, you seem to want to discuss this. No? Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Next is information items. Yeah. We haven't changed the policy yet, so until that happens.
She wants to know.
Well, you're going to enroll her now, so once she's enrolled, we'll address that if we change the policy.
I would venture to say probably yes.
Or, yes.
But I guess we can't decide that tonight.
We can't
Decide tonight.
We can't pull you back once you enroll.
From a legal standpoint, you're not in jeopardy yet. We haven't, I'm just saying, there's nothing for us to move on to grandfather you in when you're not in jeopardy at this just, it's a legal precedent.
We don't have to, we don't have to actually vote on anybody individually. This would be, when it goes to a policy, if we vote it one way, I mean, we don't even know which way it's going to go yet, so we can't even make a vote that someone would be
Right.
grandfathered. So
just
that's saying
know.
that, but then if we come to a point where we decide we're going to revoke the policy, then at that point, I think we can.
Like
make a
I
motion.
think the last time there was some wording about grandfathering, yeah.
And it is documented in these minutes that we had that discussion about the grandfathering, so I think you're fine.
In
Okay.
case we forget.
We won't.
Okay, this brings us to the board comment. Any new business from board members?
Yes, I just wanted to bring up the PSBA membership because you guys had me thinking about that earlier. I know that we were we're thinking about renewing it because it was very minimal cost to bring it to that all-inclusive. It is with the inclusive. Woo, woo.
Ms. Edwards, when is the renewal, what's the actual date of the renewal? I mean, if it just happened, that's fine. I'm just trying to find out the actual.
July 1, she said.
Okay, July 1. If the board wishes, I will contact PSBA and have somebody, they've been here before, but have somebody come in and explain to us all why we even bother. I mean, I'm not sure if anybody cares
Why
or
we
not.
even bother what?
Being a member, or what services are available because we are members.
Oh.
I think there's tons of services. It's a good point because the one thing that I thought that was really important that we could take advantage of that we weren't was the online trainings. But there's also things that they can do like review our policies, which I believe is a part of the all-inclusive membership to a point. I think there's a lot of services we don't take advantage of, to your point, that maybe we could.
I like their emails that I get daily.
There's some interesting articles in
Most of those are the legislative ones, I'll point out.
Yeah. Gary's on a roll, man. He's had, what, 3 of them published recently?
Ms. Caseman, can we trust that you will forward us that training information Mr. Jackson was kind enough to bring to our attention so that we can all be in compliance?
The trauma one.
Yeah. I'm sorry to give you homework.
I kind of think though the training issue isn't even, it's just a law that was passed.
I just want to make sure one of us is on top of it.
Yeah.
Well, the administration's usually on top of that in our behalf.
One of their goals.
Yeah.
We should find out about that in the future.
Okay.
Can I bring something up?
Absolutely.
So I we missed last meeting to actually say how nice I thought graduation was. And we didn't have a chance to really talk about it, but I thought the administration as well as the high school leadership did a fantastic job with graduation. It was a cool area. It was the first time I was there. I do want to present to the board, and I'm not sure where this takes place, but I think that there we can make some subtle changes that may make it a little nicer for the students. They don't have to see my ugly mop up on stage, or maybe I could be in the back row. But I also don't need to be handing out diplomas to these people and taking pictures with people I don't know and I've never met and I haven't taught. So my recommendation is maybe that the teachers should be involved in graduation and maybe different folks could be more, it would mean more to the students than us board members that really don't know anybody.
Yeah, but something to consider, the graduation ceremony is, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Harner, they're organized by the high school. Everything there is run and organized by the high school. So if they want us down there, then it's their choice. We didn't put ourselves up there. Somebody else did.
Well,
I would say it's history and tradition. The board is granted the authority by the state to award diplomas. And that's why the board members are the ones who hand out diplomas, because it's you have that authority granted by the state. If you would like.
Can we delegate that authority?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's.
I've seen it, I've seen it where, Scott Gutschall came up there and handed his own daughter a diploma. I think Lynn Rowson gave her daughter her diploma.
I think it would just be nice for students that have, maybe it's the class leadership that does it, or.
Principal or guidance counselors.
I don't know. I just think anybody, but.
It's something to put in front of the high school and tell them to do it the way they want to do it.
And that's been a subject of conversation between multitudes of us on multiple occasions about how, I think many of us feel that it would mean more coming from somebody the students know.
Would it be fair just to talk to the principal and let him know that it's up to the class committee and the principal leadership?
We'd be happy to if that's what the class wants, right?
Yes.
I think we would all agree there.
Okay, is that fair?
Yeah.
Good.
The other thing is that if I think that there's, advantage that if you work or teaching at school and one of your kids, I think it would be cool to be able to give them the diploma.
Like Jenny.
Yeah, like Jenny,
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Just something to consider. But anyway, it was great. I had a nice time, so thanks.
So did you actually give out any diplomas? I don't remember. I didn't think you did because I asked you. So there's nobody that has your ugly mug on their graduation picture? Okay. All right.
I just had one quick item. So I just wanted to briefly mention Wonder Bus. It was a 2-day festival that was out in Ohio. My wife's cousin Elizabeth and her husband David put it together. And the purpose of the festival was to shine a bright light on mental health and suicide prevention. And they had a real simple message. It was called La La La, which was listen and ask, love and act, link and advocate. And I thought it really dovetailed nicely into the things that we've changed this year as a group to help the students and the parents deal with, the stresses of just everyday life with the safety committee that was put together, the goals that were put together, and even the additional counselors that we hired. So I think it was worth mentioning to kind of think about bringing this into their goal was with the suicide of their son was most people didn't really talk about it because there was stigma attached to it. But they thought it's better to bring it out into the public so people felt comfortable because other people are going through the same things, whether it helps prevent or helps cope. So I thought it was worthwhile to mention that to everybody. And thank you for all the changes that were done this year, too. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other board comment? Okay, this brings us to our last general public comment.
Eric Thompson, Principal, 6th Grade Center. I'd like to thank the board on behalf of my administrative colleagues for the approval of the extension of our Act 93 agreement. Our group appreciates our opportunity and the privilege that we have to serve this community, our students, and our families. So we appreciate the board's renewal or extension of that agreement so that we start the school year with that out of the way and just thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate everything that you guys do, so thank you. Okay, moving on to calendar items. There's a Facilities Committee meeting in Board Caucus Room number 3 on September 5th at 6 p.m. September 10th, there's a Goals Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. September 12th, there's a Finance Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. September 19th, there's a Policy Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. September 26th, we have the regular work session voting meeting here in the community room. Wow, we're into October already. October 3rd, Facilities Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. October 10th is the Finance Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. October 17th is the Policy Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. October 22nd is the Goals Committee meeting, Board Caucus Room number 3. And on October 24th at 6 p.m. is the Education and Curriculum Committee meeting in Community Room A, followed by the work session regular voting meeting in the Community Room. Which brings us to the last but most important part of the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Sure, you missed one date.
I did.
Tomorrow night's first home football game.
I apologize, yes.
And Anita has tickets if you handed them out already.
Thank you, sir.
CB East.
That'll be a good game. So, okay, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Yes. So moved. Second. Mr. Micucci. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye. Opposed? This meeting